Hello, I'm going to bring the Charlottesville City Council budget work session to order. This is an in-person with an option to listen in electronically. Madam Clerk, can you call the roll?
Councilor Payne?
Here.
Councilor Smith?
Here.
Councilor Payne Smith?
Here.
Mayor Wade?
Here.
And I have not heard from Councilor Austin.
Yeah, she'll probably be coming along. So this is a budget work session. I think this will be our last one before we vote on it at our April 15th meeting. So Sam, I'll turn it over to you.
All right, as the mayor said, this is hopefully, we're all fingers crossed, the last work session for the budget cycle. This is a catch-all meeting in that we are looking to wrap up things that are not quite settled at this time, as well as making sure that there is nothing else that needs to be considered before you cast your final vote on the 15th. So we have a few items to discuss. We're going to review Vibrant Community Fund and the hopeful reconciliation of that to finalize that particular aspect of the budget. And then we're going to spend some time discussing personal property taxes and then the tax scenario in general that is a part of the proposed budget for FY2025. And then we'll answer any questions or go over anything else that is of the pleasure of council. So I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Hamill and she will begin. Or is it me?
It's you.
It's me. Okay. So the first slide represents the series of conversations that have occurred over the past couple of weeks. As you all, as we had the work session on outside and nonprofit agencies, there were a series of questions and further considerations that appeared to be council's interest. I shared with you at that time, naturally, that our goal as a staff recommendation was to preserve the process, but understanding that, of course, you have other considerations in balancing the various priorities and the requests that come to you. So what I did over the past couple of days was to capture what I heard from you, and wherever I heard enough in the way of designating or be able to demonstrate what was a majority, I have captured it on this list, and it speaks to the final questions of, there was, I guess, what, six organizational grant awards that are a part of your conversations. I'm showing you here the total request, the recommendation, which was the recommendation that came from the VCF process, the site review process where individuals are part of a team and they review it, and then the revised distribution based on what I heard from all of you. This is presented to you as more of a question. If this is your desire, then you should be able to give us that indication, and we are ready to move forward with VCF as this becoming the new proposal, or if there's any further consideration of changes, then we would look for you to help us understand what those might be.
Thank you. So before we begin, I just wanted to talk one about the Buck Squad, because we received a lot of emails over the last week or so on the Buck Squad, and it's some misinformation that we weren't going to fund them. It was a recommendation to fund them at a higher level, but the recommendation is now $200,000, and I think that's still a 25–30% increase from last year, and it's certainly not unusual for council to make recommendations to the recommendation from the committee. Is Sam doesn't necessarily like it, but it happens sometimes. So I just wanted to put it out there that we're still funding the Buck Squad at a high level. We treasure the work that they do in the community, the difference and the impact that they're making in our community. So and the funding level that we've given them shows that. So I just want to put that out there and kind of get some input now on just a general recommendation from the other councilors.
I think what we have up there looks fantastic. I support it.
I'm fine with it, but would only add an addition. I would recommend not funding the Fralin Museum. I continue to not think it's proper to be funding UVA programming, particularly given their lack of engagement with us on important issues.
I second that. A quick clarification about this chart. Never mind. I read it. I figured it out. Thanks.
So I'm looking at the chart and I'm seeing that, okay, and I'm seeing numbers that are different from what Mr. Sanders sent us yesterday.
Are they?
I didn't think so.
I didn't think so.
So the total request was what was in the actual application. The recommendation was what came out of the VCF process. And then the revised numbers are the total of what they would receive. Maybe there was the one email that I saw listed the change, but I just added the change so you could actually see their total funding.
And I do see, I think that was the final, maybe I sent it before we made the final change because the number for the Uhuru Foundation is different.
The number
And-
for CRHA.
And CRHA is different, so there
Okay.
was adjustments to be able to make sure that it balanced. That was my attempt to check my math. I didn't check it before I sent it to you.
So there's a difference
these
relatively
right, or yours
of
is
about
right?
$10,000 between
Yeah,
what-
that should be
what's
right.
in
It adds up
yesterday's
correctly.
email.
Okay, yeah, if it adds up, then we're,
Okay. I mean, I will come back to some of what I said before. And one of my broad concerns is that when we end up second-guessing the committee that has spent a lot more time on it than we have, that we, seems to me, ought to have a pretty good reason for doing that. And we ought to have superior information to that which they had. I'm looking at the few things here, and I'll say one of the, I'm not having an issue with the recommendation for the Buck Squad being cut significantly from what originally the VCF had said, because I think that's a situation where we do have some additional information. But on things like the Uhuru Foundation, I think I understand the theory as to why we would fund them when the VCF committee did not. And apparently, the reason they weren't funded by the VCF committee was that they felt, that the VCF committee felt that the capacity building kind of study that they were looking to do didn't really fit very well with the purposes of the Vibrant Community Fund, and we can make the policy decision that we disagree with that. But I'm also struck by the fact that I personally don't have, I tried to do a little bit of looking since getting the recommendation yesterday afternoon, tried to do a little bit of looking to see what I could find out about, for example, about the finances of the Uhuru Foundation. I found a year out of date 990, the most recent 990 that had been filed, but still a year out of date. I saw something about them getting a $500,000 federal grant apparently in September, but I don't really know anything more about why this is a particularly good expenditure of the city's $94,600. For the CRHA Resident Services Program, I have sort of the same issue, that I don't know why it is exactly that the VCF committee did not approve them. I also don't know exactly what it is that is going to be done with $137,000. I assume, given what's being talked about, that they would be hiring some people to do certain things, but I'm a little bit troubled that nobody has, from the city, has apparently looked at it and passed on it as being something that's a good expenditure of the city's funds. So when we put ourselves in the position of substituting our judgment for the judgment of the Vibrant Community Fund, it ought to be on the basis of superior information, not inferior information. And at this point, I don't have the superior information behind the request for the Uhuru Foundation or CRHA. They may both be perfectly valid expenditures. I think that we do ourselves a disservice, and we do the VCF process a disservice when we simply disagree with them. Those are my thoughts.
I wanted to clarify that I was seconding Michael's point about the Fralin.
I got you.
Okay, thank you.
I was looking for someone else to say something if there was going to be anything else.
Yeah. So, I think that we have a majority that will support the recommendation.
And just to clarify, two people were interested in the Philly Museum. Was anyone else interested in any adjustment there?
I sort of. I think that there are some, I don't favor a blanket policy of we're not going to support the University of Virginia and what they're doing. But I will say that in this particular instance, for this roughly $6,000, at a time, I mean, their selling point was going to be that they were going to be able to do some programs that they're doing and offer free admission to Charlottesville school students or something like that. And I would just note that part of the argument that they always give to us about why they're not going to give us any pilot program, payments in lieu of taxes, is all the free things they do for the local community. And if they're going to rely on that, then let them rely on it. So I don't see it as specifically sort of as anti-university as some of the comments a couple of weeks ago came across, but I also don't think it's a good expenditure of our funds.
So is that a third, Lloyd?
Yes.
Okay, so,
And to clarify, we were checking, we see 12,000 is the number.
Okay.
So just want to make sure that you are understanding that that's what you're requesting,
Sure.
is that we remove 12,000 from the Vibrant Community Fund. At this moment, recommended to be awarded to the Fralin Museum.
There's something else they were asking for that we gave them six, that we were going to be giving them six. Was that like the Festival of the Book or something like that? I don't remember.
That's what I'm wondering. It might be, I don't remember. there
but
being-
for the Fralin, it was 12, and so it's the
Is it
recommend.
only one Fralin?
Yes.
Okay. So I
Yeah.
thought, yeah.
Okay. So that, in addition to what's on the board,
Yeah, I'd just like to say about that topic, just so that it's clear. I support what's being proposed by, I support what has just been said. I will say, and we don't have to get into it now, the university does do a lot for the community, and just like it's not helpful when we talk with folks at the university and it's one-sided about how they do all this for us, I think that as valid as the points have been made about pilot and other things, I just hope that we can reframe the dialogue, or ever how you want to put it, such that we're trying to be proactive in working through this together as opposed to at loggerheads. It does feel a little petty to be taking out $12,000 for something that's a valuable program. On the other hand, maybe it's what we need to do to sort of make clear that we want some things to change. So that's where I stand on it.
And on that note, I'd like to add something that, while the 12,000 might seem petty, especially in light of the overall budget that UVA has, I think for some of the other groups that are in the VCF fund that are getting money, it is kind of, a lot of them are about that much. So,
I hear what you're saying.
yeah.
I'm just saying that I just hope in the conversations going forward, we can, it feels a little, just around the sort of narrative that I've heard, it feels a little negative. And anyway, it's fine. I don't disagree with you. $12,000 is a lot of money to another group.
Exactly.
And I can certainly see that rationale makes a lot of sense.
okay, so Sam, it's the recommendation of council to support your recommendations here in addition to eliminating the $12,000 for the Fraley Museum.
Right.
So in the past, just a quick question on that, any money that has been unallocated has gone into an unallocated pot to use for new and emerging or other things that come up. Is that what you want to do, or did you want to reassign that 12,000 to something else?
I think at this point to go to that fund.
Agreed.
Agreed.
Unallocated.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
And to confirm, because I can't remember, because I got a lot going on in my head right now,
Mhm.
what was the balance that we had in the unallocated from the process?
$700 whole dollars.
$700. So now it's $12,700 in the unallocated. I just want to make sure you knew that too.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, so you can,
All right, we're good. We are winning right now because you made that decision. Let's see if we can make some more.
All right, so as promised, we have gone back and the revenue team has met one last time, sharpened our pencils and all our estimates. And we do have some changes to add to amend revenue, which is good news. Tax on bank stock is coming in a little higher than anticipated. B-Pol is coming in. We have at $800,000 more than we had originally, now that they've actually, those returns have been submitted. We've also gotten numbers from the state for the constitutional officers, which will amount to a little over $175,000. In addition, we took a look at the EMS revenue trends, and we have adjusted those upward about $250,000. And then there was an error in the budget book. There was some revenue for the police department from UVA, actually, for reimbursable overtime that was put in as a negative, and so that is a correction there. So we have additional revenue of just over $1.3 million.
Yay.
In addition, we have two adjustments on the expenditure side that also are a reduction in expenditures. The regional jail board met, and they have continued to work on their budget and revise that, which gave us about $106,000 in budgetary savings. In addition, our transfer to CAT is going down slightly. We had originally, when we were working on the budget, it was unclear where the county was going to stand with their share of those costs. And so we are reducing that, we know now, and we're reducing that transfer. So that gives us some expenditure reductions of just under $180,000. So altogether, if we take the additional revenue and the expenditure reductions, we have just over $1.5 million that will be increased in the budget. So that would take the city manager's proposed budget of $251 million up to $253 million.
Can you explain the CAT transfer again? So to me, it sounds like we're funding them less, but can you explain how that's probably not the case and I'm misunderstanding you?
So for CAT, their revenues are federal, state, city, county, and the county has a share. When we added some things to CAT, as you recall, some new positions, some new things. We had not discussed that with the county at the time, and so our transfer, because we weren't sure where they were going to land, we had put in a transfer higher in the general fund to cover those if the county were not going to ante up its full share as part of its budget. Gotcha. And so they are, and
So
we've
more
adjusted
like a
that
county
transfer.
reimbursement
Correct.
sort of thing? Okay.
So it was just, we had over budgeted, basically.
Okay. Thank you.
So, keeping that in mind, we're going to move on to talk about the tax increases.
Could I ask
Yeah, sure.
one question?
Sure.
So, and if I'm stealing thunder, let me know. I know that one thing that Councilor Payne rightfully pointed out was that we're not funding CAT, that there's a need for 11 drivers or whatever at 800. I see the green signs right
Yeah.
there. Are we going to talk about that later, or should we talk about it now?
I think let's get through this, and then
Okay.
that way you know what all you have, and then you can consider
Because
that.
my question, well, just to sort of give you a sense, my question is if you had that $850,000, could you deploy it this fiscal year or not?
In FY25.
Yeah,
Yes.
because
Yes.
with all the other stuff you're doing with the bus system, I have some concerns, but I'd be happy to find out if those concerns are unwarranted.
Yeah, we can talk about that.
So moving on, this is a table you've seen. We took a look at the incremental values of each of the 4 taxes that you've been talking about. Basically, either as it relates to a penny or a percent on those, and these are the values for those. And we can come back to this as a reference if we need to. In the 25 proposed budget, as you recall, we included a 2-cent real estate tax increase, a 1% meals tax increase, and a 1% lodging tax increase. Those 3 tax increases accounted for $6.3 million in the proposed budget. So and now we know that we have a budget amendment of just over 1.5. So the point of this slide being is that the budget amendments, you can either use that to fund something that is not currently funded, or you could use that as an offset to one of these taxes. Finally, from our discussion Monday night at the council meeting, again, this table that's under the blue line is what's included in the budget that was just on the previous slide. In addition, because our advertisements have to include the maximum rate that you'd be willing to consider, we did advertise a 3-cent real estate tax increase, which you could still have that lever to pull if you wanted to. Or as was requested for the personal property, a public ad and a notice of public hearing, which will happen on April 15th, will be published in Saturday's paper, publishing $4.80, which would generate about $1.8 million in additional revenue. So I'm going to stop at this point and let Mr. Divers talk to you about personal property.
So it's 60 cents increase over 4.2?
I'll share it again. That's the max. You can do anything up to the 60 cents based on our
So that would be
advertisement.
like a 14% increase.
You ready?
Yep. Get your slide.
Okay, been an exciting week. Let's get this up here. So I'm not here to, tell you do it or don't do it. I'm just sort of here to kind of go over the implications of changing the personal property tax rate. So the first thing is, obviously now we know we can do it. When I walked into the meeting on Monday, and y'all were talking about personal property, I wasn't quite sure if we were going to be able to do that. We're still in the middle of, we're getting to the end of completing the personal property book for 2024. And so we kind of had to accelerate that this week and to get you some good projections. One of the things we did figure out is the $30,000 per penny increase was pretty close. It ends up being $30,238 for each penny on the personal property rate. As you see on the chart, what we've tried to do, I'll talk about what on the right first. This is sort of a breakdown of all of the vehicles in the city. We're talking passenger vehicles, not big heavy trucks. We're not talking about trailers and RVs. We're talking about passenger vehicles. This is how the valuation on passenger vehicles breaks down in the city at this moment, as they're assessed for the current book. Those at the very top, you see from 0 to 1,500, as we talked about the other night, those are going to get full tax relief. So those don't get any, they won't pay any tax if it's a personal use vehicle. But you can see that 85% or so, 90% of all the vehicles in the city are, under $25,000. So, there's not a lot of people driving high-dollar vehicles. That's the first thing I want to point out. If you look at the chart on the left, you can see we're trying to show you what the impact of the increase in tax would be. So, Chrissy, if you want to put the revenue increase to 480, which would be a 60 cents increase, you can see what the markup is going to be for each person or for that value of a car. So, for instance, if you've got a $40,000 car and personal property rate gets increased by 60 cents, you're gonna get an extra $241 you got to pay. I've given a couple of examples of commonly driven vehicles in the city. 2017 Subaru Outback. This is not to say if you've got a 2017 Subaru Outback that this is exactly what you're going to pay. This is a Subaru Outback. The wagon, the 5-door, the premium. These vary by trim level. So these are generalizations, but that's generally where a 17 Subaru Outback lands. So that person's probably going to get 84-cent increase. 84 increase. 18 Ford F-150 is going to get probably about $144 increase. And then an electric Tesla Model Y, very popular vehicle, $262. So I just kind of wanted to point that out, just to kind of give you an idea. I think you guys were curious how this was going to impact regular folks.
I'm sorry, you said 0 to 1,500 is waived.
0 to 15, a vehicle with $1,500 or below value gets 100%. It will get 100% personal property tax relief
Got it.
after the next city council meeting. Currently, it's 1,000 or less.
And sorry, you just said the Tesla was a popular vehicle. Are you saying that in general, or are you saying that specifically in Charlottesville?
It's pretty popular in Charlottesville. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of Teslas around. I could probably find you a number on how many there are, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
Although it looks like the assessed vehicles with a value of that or above is in the range of like 1 to 2% of
Yeah.
Yeah.
the vehicles.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I wanted to, it's an electric
Sure,
vehicle.
yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
so I wanted to give you an idea. Those are expensive vehicles, so that's what we're talking about.
Right. But there's not
Um,
like, it's not the majority of vehicles. That's
No,
just- okay.
no, but it's a popular electric vehicle.
Okay.
So let's see here. So we covered the examples I wanted to show you. I wanted to also point out, there was some talk about business, tangible, personal property, and machinery and tools. You are allowed to set a different rate for business tangibles and machinery and tools. In Charlottesville, we have always booked those categories with the larger category of personal property. So for all of the math you're seeing, business tangibles and machinery and tools are included in that. So if you take those out, the numbers don't add up anymore. So what I'm telling you is if you're going to raise personal property, you need to raise those as well. Next year, if you want to tease those out and set different rates for those, we can talk about it. At this late date, it would be a nightmare.
It would be a nightmare because,
Logistically, to try to do that, and we'd have to give you a whole new scenario of figures. The revenue increase right there, if we take out machinery and tools or we take out business tangibles, it's not
The 30,238.
right.
right.
It's not the same.
Yeah, I would be curious, do you have a general sense of how much of that 30,000 is
Machinery and
car-
tools in
percentage?
2023 was $340,000. There are only 36 accounts for machinery and tools. We don't have a lot of manufacturing here, so that's $9,400 per account. If you did that, if you took it up to 60 cents, you'd get another 35,000, 45,000, and each account, you'd get a $1,300 increase for each business. Business tangible personal property accounts for $2.4 million. That's a lot. We've got a lot more of those. We've got about 2,900 accounts that pay business tangibles. That's at $825 per account. If you increase that by 60 cents, you're going to increase their tax by $115 per account. That's just for your edification. Like I said, at this point, this far down the river, I don't think it's an option.
I mean, we don't know what those accounts are, and we don't know, like you do, but we don't. This is like, in your best judgment, knowing what these companies are and what they do, is any of that increase going to be
Painful?
yeah, like
Yeah, it's going to be
right,
painful.
like is it going to close a business? I mean, because I was
I mean,
kind of
I can't-
interested
I
in seeing
can't-
this without.
I can't
without
say that, but I mean, if I've got a small manufacturing business and, and my tax bill goes up, I'm not gonna like it,
Well,
Yeah.
yeah, but
But
I was
these
kind
are averages. I mean, there's some that pay a lot, there's some that pay a little.
Yeah.
I can't answer that
I
question.
guess you're saying it's just the time you've had this week and what it would take to really do the exercise that Council Oshram understandably would like to see. It just has not worked out.
Not for this year. We can do it next
Yeah.
year.
Yeah.
And to refigure our numbers to give you guys the revenue that you're looking for to be able to offset meals tax or do whatever other things you need to try to not include those, we wouldn't be able to do it.
okay, because my goal is not to put those companies at risk.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that, again, on this time, these are some great questions. I think that, that you can we all can kind of get a list of things that we want them to consider for next year, and we'll have, a work session, or it'll be something that maybe Chrissy can bring when we have our first work session or something on that. I don't want to, without knowing the full impact, I just don't feel comfortable, even going down this path this late into it, the budget process. That's just where I am.
Yeah, I mean, we're interrupting your presentation, so.
No, it's fine.
let's
I
keep
mean, I
going.
want you guys to ask questions. It's just, I've been here 10 years and nobody's looked at personal property. No council has looked at it because it's not that much, they always look at it's not that much money. They go to the other taxes because that's
Right,
where it's at.
I mean, that's what we did too.
Yeah.
We kind of missed
Yeah,
thinking about
and
it.
so and so it's never come up. We've always had all of them have always been at the same $4.20 rate. They don't have to be, but they are.
Well, I do appreciate Councilor Oshram. I think having a new set of eyes helps. And I think she picked up on this, and I think it is a lever, whatever, that we should consider. I don't know if this is the right time or not, but I do think it's been a good exercise and will be a good exercise. For me, I see this, it seems like, it's interesting, 75% of the vehicles in the city are less than 15,000. This is really good information. For me, I almost would be willing to say, do you still have more on your presentation?
Yeah, it's fine. Go
No,
ahead.
you
I mean,
go.
a couple other points.
ahead, go
but-
ahead.
I'd be curious to just hear the.
Yeah, I would like
All
to.
right, well,
yeah.
well, I mean, they're not.
This
they're
is a
not-
great chart.
Brian Ray did this. I asked him to do something
It's-
like this, and he did this.
It's really, and
So,
the interact, just,
Yeah,
I love a
yeah.
spreadsheet. I like this one a lot too.
yeah, he's pretty sharp. So there's two other things I wanted to point out. And I said it the other night. I'm just going to remind you again that this is the tax that people are going to complain about. This is the one that they stroke a check for. They don't sit down and write a check for real estate tax. This is the one that we're gonna hear about. And so just pointing that out one last time. The other thing I wanted to tell you about, this has nothing really to do with any of this, but just something, a housekeeping issue that we're doing in my office that I need you folks to know about. I don't need you guys to bless it, but I need you to be aware of it. For 20 years, the minimum value on all vehicles that we assess has been at the same level. So the way, let's say for instance, when a car is assessed, we get it from an assessment guide. It stays in that assessment guide for a number of years until it gets sufficiently old that it falls out of the guide, and then we assess it using a depreciation schedule. Well, eventually that car is going to depreciate to a point where it hits a minimum. Those minimums have not been adjusted in 20 years, so we're going to be adjusting them now. We're going to move, we're not messing with boats. We're going to take mobile homes. Believe it or not, the minimum value on a mobile home in Charlottesville for 20 years has been $100. We're going to make that $1,000. Motorcycles, it's been $100. We're going to make that $300. RVs, $600. We're going to take that to $1,000. Trailers, it's been $100. We're leaving it at $100 because there's some pretty crappy trailers out there. Cars, pickups, trucks, up to 4,000 pounds. Minimum has been $250. We're taking that to $600. Cars, pickup trucks above 4,000 pounds has been $600. We're taking it to $1,000. And then heavy trucks have always been $600. That's like dump trucks and whatnot. We're taking that to $1,000. That'll be the minimum value. This should have no impact on personal vehicles that are eligible for personal property tax relief, because those are all going to be below the $1,500 threshold. It's not anything you have to bless. It's just a housekeeping issue in my office that we've decided it's time after 20 years we need to do that. So I'm letting you know.
So that's just a kind of separate FYI.
That's a FYI, just heads up. Now I'm done.
So, we got some, I'm sorry. So, question this morning on the amount of citizens that are delinquent in that, and I just want to get a sense of that.
Jason Vandiver is going to address that. He's out of town, and he's going to get you guys something
Okay.
tomorrow morning, I believe, on all of those issues that were raised.
Part of what I really like about this chart is that you've given concrete examples so people can kind of put themselves in that theory. It's hard for people to estimate where they are in kind of a number, just a thing of numbers. So I think that's important because none of those, I mean, it makes it seem reasonable for me looking at it also. And I think that's useful to get to kind of see how that does apply, especially since this isn't a tax that we've looked at in a long time. Because we've raised the real estate tax recently. The meals tax is already kind of coming to as much of a peak as it can get, especially relative to other cities in Virginia. And so I still find this to be an attractive option. And while you said that, yes, people will notice this more, I don't really think we should rate our taxes based on sneakiness. Like, that's not a metric.
Oh, you mean the ones who register their vehicles out of the city?
No, like noticing whether or not it comes out of your escrow for your mortgage versus something you have to write a check for. I mean, it's still coming out of someone's pocket. And so I don't like using that as a metric.
I just meant that's the one we're going to get calls about. We're going to get. I'll let you come in our office one day.
Yeah, no, I mean,
take a few calls.
we get emails too. But that I don't find that as a deter. I mean, I know I'm not going to be getting all of those, but I'm going to be getting some as well. So, but people will notice, people paying attention to their wallets. And I just don't think that's the best rubric we should consider.
Do you have any sense, and I know that this is a lot, do you have any sense, Mr. Divers, of the median machinery and tools tax amount?
I don't.
Okay.
I can find it. Like I said, there's 36 accounts in the city. I can get it for you.
Could we go?
I've got actually one more question.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other rate differentials other than 1,500 or below is waived? Like, is there anything where up to $20,000 is taxed at a different rate than higher than $20,000?
Well, I mean, the way personal property tax relief works is that 100%, the city gets a $3.5 million grant from the state. We figure out all the vehicles that are eligible, that are $1,500 or less. They get 100%. Then we look at the 3.5 million and see what's left. And we have to split that evenly over the rest of the eligible fleet on the value of the rest of the eligible fleet that's below $20,000. So that's sort of the hard ceiling that the state does mandate. And so that's the number that I give you guys every year at the last, when you adopt the budget. And we're still working on that. I think right now it's going to be 31%. We've still got some more cars to assess, but that's where we are now.
Wait, sorry, 31%?
31% on the first $20,000 of value for eligible vehicles gets paid by the state. That is accounted for in this number, right? So if we look at the $40,000 vehicle, that you're paying that $241. That's the taxpayer share. We've already accounted for the state paying what they're going to pay. But no, I don't. Yeah, I think I understand what you're saying. There's no other programs. There's no other.
But so if you had a $40,000 car, the first, is it eligible for that state?
$20,000 of
of
it
it
would get some.
And then anything above that
The
is
taxpayer
full
pays
rate.
entirely. Correct.
Got it, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
I think
They could
that's
probably
helpful.
make it more complicated if they tried, but it'd be hard.
And is that something that is a rebate, or your bill is already less?
Your
when you
bill
pay it?
is reduced. It's already.
So
it's
you don't
cooked
have to
in
go
already.
through that rigmarole?
Right. Yep.
Thank you, that's helpful.
Sure.
Could you go back to the tax list? Unless there was another.
This one?
Yes. I wonder about the possibility of just saying, let's do a 5% increase in personal property tax.
Let me go to a different screen.
Adding 21 cents.
So maybe that was one of the scenarios in the drop-down?
I guess my point is, if we could say, I mean, what's being proposed is 14%. Right.
So let me show you this, and then you can, let me just walk you through this for a second, because this is intended to help you do some math here in public.
The drop downs on my sheet were round numbers. It wasn't. Yeah.
So these are the four taxes that that you are discussing for increases. These are the first column, the rates. These are this is the current rate that people are currently paying. What is keyed in here now in terms of the increase is what is actually included in the proposed budget, and this would be the resulting new rate of that. So when you come over here, this is the revenue that's generated. The 6.3 is what is actually already baked into the budget. The budget amendments that we just talked about a few minutes ago, that gives you an additional $1.5 million of revenue. And then as we compare that to what's already baked in the budget, you can see in this case, we have a budget surplus of the budget amendments. So, to your point, I don't have this set up to do a percent, but I would, if we wanted to do this as 20 cents, that would give you.
So that's a 5% increase, basically.
Yeah.
0.21 would be 5%.
And then if let's say you wanted to get rid of the meals tax, well, you see that doesn't get you there because now you're short $925,000. So we have the ability to change these around to look at some different scenarios.
What would the meals be at half? Cents? Can you do, is that?
Then you'd have 601 to reassign. Or remove.
addition.
Hmm.
In
So-
addition to the new revenue.
It's in
Oh,
here.
you have it in there? Oh, that's right, I see it.
Can you do that, but pop it back up to 480, please?
This one?
Yeah, thank you.
I mean, would you, Council Ocean, be, as opposed to 14%, given the fact that this is such a seismic question, maybe we say, let's try 5%,
I mean, I think.
given the fact that we can't disentangle all of these things, but at least gets us something?
Yeah, and I understand where you're coming from with that, because I am concerned about the business items as well, the industry tools and things. But when you look at 14% and it's $84,
So,
It's funny because I have the exact opposite response.
yeah.
You're missing a lot.
That is substantial.
So let me, I'm gonna try to not get myself in trouble. We're assuming a lot, and we don't know. And the restraint that I would be asking you to consider would be in association with the idea that if you want to truly demonstrate that equity matters, then we should leave some room for the possibility that we may not know, and we need to hear from people. And by not really restraining ourselves at this moment and assuming that $84 won't make a difference, we will miss the chance of really finding out if it would. I think it's important for us to not miss this opportunity to consider whatever changes and options that we have here, because we've just realized an additional $1.5 million as well, that we don't have to do everything right now. And as I have stated to you, we will be back at this conversation again next year, because collective bargaining is going to continue to cost us. So it won't be as complicated, I hope, as this is, because of the size of the changes that we're making. But because we are going to be making, yet again, a sizable change with our next bargaining unit, you're going to have to consider some use of these levers again. And we can do more then if you feel comfortable doing that. But I'm just simply reminding you of your strategic outcomes and channeling Deputy City Manager Marshall right now, that the restraint that is available to you is, let's not rush too fast, do too much, and injure folks and find out later that we could have done something different.
I hear you. Could you go back to the slide, please, or the spreadsheet?
The one that calculates the tax?
Yeah.
Sure.
To me, the only counter to that is we've been told that meals tax is very regressive. And so,
so those are equity concerns we've already been hearing.
which is why,
So you can
to
make
me,
this
I'm just looking
0.
at this like, what seems a reasonable nudge? 5% is the most that I'd be willing to increase that.
With
Yeah.
leaving meals tax where?
With reducing meals tax to 0.5%.
Because something that, could happen is with the money you've found plus this adjustment is we could get a couple more bus drivers.
I personally have a lot of skepticism about whether, and the reason is I've said on the MPO and the RTP, and I've been hearing about bus drivers and trying to hire bus drivers, and now you've got a union. No offense, I know you guys are working really hard. I have personally a lot of skepticism that if we gave $750,000 or $800,000, which is being discussed, to find 11 new bus drivers, that you would be able to do that in a year.
And maybe that is very true, that 11 would be a reach, but 4,
Okay, well then let's.
something,
I think
to
the
that
other thing we have
effect.
to say with our public is, people are like, okay, you found another 1.5,
why aren't you,
why aren't you lowering
Lowering tax
taxes?
rates,
And
also
I
valuable.
appreciate, where Counselor Payne comes from on the real estate tax. But again, and I recognize the value, you would call it a policy choice. I'm not quite sure that I'm able to follow you on all of those things, but mostly just because of my own lack of education, I suppose. But I have to think too about how most of the money that we raise is through real estate tax. And so if we're talking about 2 cent or 3 cent, I would prefer to keep it at 2 cent, because we're probably going to be coming back around with the things that you just mentioned and be right back here again. And so for me, I would rather sort of, preserve my, what is it they call, hold back, anyway, I would
Keep
prefer,
your powder dry.
that is the word I was looking for. On that, not because I necessarily disagree with what Michael would say about what's most progressive or regressive or whatever, but even though those things are true, we still have a public that we have to be responsive for, and they're not necessarily thinking about it in those terms.
Yeah. And I'm very reluctant to increase the property tax.
Real estate tax?
No, the
Property, okay, sorry.
personal property tax, I'm sorry. I could be convinced to do 5% because, particularly because I don't have the information of the impact it's going to have on those who might, the delinquent in that process, because I know in particular, that it might hit the community of low wealth and color a little bit more disproportionately, and I just want to have that information. That's what, we kind of, in the final stage, doing this without really fully thinking about it. And I don't want to, do this and then 2 months from now we realize that we should have, thought about it a little bit more. So that's why, we're all going to be here next year. So that's kind of where I am. So I could do the 5%, but
You could do 5% increase on personal property, you'd be comfortable with that?
The 20 cents.
yeah.
Okay. Lodging tax, no one's arguing about. So if we did what's there now, we would not be increasing meals tax by 1%, but only by 0.5%. And we still have $600,000 more, and you could get,
2 or 3 bus drivers.
Yeah.
About
how do you feel about that?
Well, let me say a couple things. First of all, if we end up with $600,000, unspent funds at this point, and we're trying to convert that into bus drivers, it would probably convert into about 7 or 8 bus drivers.
Yep.
Just pulling that out.
The question that I've got is, if you had 7 or 8 bus drivers, does that get CAT to a reasonable next level? Is there an intermediate step between 59 bus drivers and 70 bus drivers, where, let's say, 66 bus drivers allows certain things to happen on Route 7, and that sort of make those kinds of determinations. The other one point I just wanted to make about the personal property tax is, over the last couple of years, when the assessed values were going up even faster than the real estate values were going up in the last few years, I, for one, argued against lowering those rates, in part because I just didn't think that it was something that we ought to be trying to play with year to year. The consequence was that people who owned cars, perhaps in some cosmic scheme of things, sort of got stuck worse over the last couple of years than they might otherwise have been. And I'm just sort of reluctant to say, okay, now that the situation has changed a little bit, now we're going to go ahead and stick you again. And I don't know what that translates into, frankly, but except for a general reluctance to tamper with that rate, just because when the shoe was on the other foot the last couple of years, we didn't tamper with the rate, and many other jurisdictions did.
I'm sorry, which tax?
The personal property.
Got it, sorry.
At a time when the county was reducing their rate by, I don't know, 60 cents or something, we caught a lot of flack because we held where we were. I just sort of feel like if we're going to keep to the notion of keeping those rates more or less stable and not varying them year to year based on what the assessments look like, it just, to me, feels like maybe it's time to give them a little bit of a break that we didn't give them the last couple of years.
So are you saying you don't want to raise personal property taxes?
I haven't really figured out where I come out on all of this. I would like to try to figure out if there is a reasonable way to, I mean, I share Brian's concerns that I'm not sure that even if we said, fine, here's, here's another $850,000, that anybody could go out and hire 11 bus drivers right away.
So while we didn't fluctuate our personal property tax rate, we did waive, was it license registration fees that cost us $1 million?
Vehicle license.
Vehicle licensing, so,
Vehicle
Fees,
fees.
900,000.
The
right,
decal.
so that was close to $1 million, and so we did that as a personal property relief, so there was a break given.
Michael and I fought the good fight for the sticker, but we
Nobody won the sticker.
I don't know if you could call it a good fight, but yeah. Well, I have a number of thoughts, and none of these are new and surprising to anyone, but I still think they're important. And I'll just keep saying it. I'm looking at the total context, and I have a concern that you look at the meals tax increases over the past few years, this proposed increase, combine that with, we're likely going to have a referendum for a sales tax referendum, which is also one of the most regressive taxes available. And then you look at personal property tax on top of that. I'm worried that in the context of the next, over the past 3 years through next year, that we've significantly increased and leaned on the taxes that disproportionately hit poor and working people the most. And I'm concerned that the personal property tax is a piece of that, particularly in the context of meals tax and sales tax increases that are coming either this year or potentially next year. This is just my perspective from my family and people I know, but in Charlottesville, many poor and working people need to have a car. If they work in Albemarle, if they're a single parent with hourly wages, they don't have that choice. If you're living with a $10,000 car, you're not necessarily living large, you may need it, and that $84 for some families will be a meaningful increase. All the taxes are bad, but the real estate tax is correlated with wealth that you own. If you have a $500,000 house, 1 cent is like a $50 increase to your annual bill. And in addition, we have those tax relief programs where if you're 65 or above, based on your income, you qualify for relief. I believe if you're about a little less than $40,000 a year in income, it's 100% relief. And then there's the CHAP program where if the assessed value of your home is $460,000 or less, and your income is $60,000 or less, you qualify for some pretty substantial relief. So I do think that we're making a policy mistake relying so much on our most regressive taxes, and I still think I would say our best option, given what we've advertised, is a 3-cent increase to the real estate tax, lodging tax, and then probably personal property tax if there's absolutely no way we can, find any way to not need that increase, and then meals tax last. But I do think it's a mistake to not be relying on the real estate tax first.
But we are. We've raised it 2 pennies. We raised it a penny 2 years ago. We'll probably raise it 2 pennies. I mean, we're gonna, again, and if you look at the total amounts of money that we're raising, we raise a whole lot more money off people with real estate tax than we do with meals taxes. I mean, you talk about the big picture and context. I appreciate that, but most of the money that comes into the city in terms of taxes is from people on their real estate. And so, to me, I feel like this is spreading out the pain. To your point, no tax is a good tax, but anyway, so I'm not trying to attack your position. I'm just not understanding. I don't know.
I also counter both of those assertions of no tax is a good tax. Taxes are how we pay for bus drivers and schools and that sort of thing. So we can't not use them or collect them. And to Michael's point, or Brian's point, the rate has gone up a penny, but the assessments have skyrocketed. My home has doubled in the last 5 years. Other people are feeling that too. I mean, you know, there are 60% of the folks in our city who are renters, and that's gonna filter down to them as well, even though it is maybe more progressive than a meals tax.
I think the question is that's gonna be driven primarily by assessments. If their landlords, because of the rate change, goes up $50 in a year, I don't know how much, if at all, that really filters down to rent. But certainly assessment increases no matter what we do, unless we, and I'm not suggesting this at all, but unless we wanted to follow a locality like Lynchburg that reduces their real estate tax rate every year to track assessments. I mean, that's just gonna be the situation regardless of the rate.
I know, but her point is that well, you know this. Her point is assessments are going up and then also tax increases on top of it. I'm not comfortable with more than 2 cents on a real estate tax. I mean, I respect everything that Michael has to say, very much, but
Yeah, I'm at 2 cents as well for real estate. This,
I would like to add, Mr. Williams is on the phone, able to speak to you, but I will share with you that, as I expressed to you before we got to the point of finalizing what became my proposed recommendation of a budget, that I did have transportation as one of the priorities for this year, and that priority was 6 drivers. That's what I was aiming to be able to provide to him, as he had made the request for 11. So if we are able to deliver those 6, then we would actually be reverting back to what we had really worked our budget scope around in the first place. So at a minimum, that would be nice to be able to say, despite, and really with everything that we did get done, which we got a lot into this budget, being able to do that would be helpful.
and what was 6?
6 drivers.
455,
450.
456.
Right.
so you need 456 more to do that?
With that extra that we just did that scenario, that 600,000 is more than enough to ensure that we could get the 6 drivers.
Could you please go back to the this other spreadsheet?
Because that slide that you just saw, we had already done all this work for, I don't know how many drivers he originally did, because he wanted more than that, but we worked through all of that, and that's how we arrived at 6 before we were unable to make the numbers balance.
Do you want to,
I think it was 0.5 meals and
you want to
and
leave the half
20
for
at
meals?
I think that's
Oops,
what's up there.
not
property.
5, sorry.
We're not doing that.
We'll never be able to eat out in this town again.
I wouldn't be able to walk out in public.
And then I think you had 20 cents
I
on
think it was
personal
20
property.
personal property, yeah.
601, yep.
And there's the 601.
So that gives you a little more than you need.
Which I would, if you would like to hear from him in regards to, as Counselor Snook said, what would that get you?
I would, and
Okay.
I would also like to note that the trade-off is kind of almost 1-for-1 with personal property covering the surplus that could be applied to bus drivers.
Do you see him, Remy? All right, Mr. Williams?
I'm here. Good evening. Getting 6 additional drivers, any additional resources is going to help us, first and foremost. Additional 6 drivers, though, is going to get us closer to, we had a plan that we worked out with the consultants. We kind of phased it in because we were very aware and cognizant that we weren't going to be able to add all the drivers we needed, so we looked at a phasing in approach. It gets us very close to getting into what we would call phase 2, which is a little bit of enhancements over top of getting us back to pre-pandemic level of service. So we would prioritize adding service to the center off of the Route 11. We would prioritize 30-minute service on the 6, which gets service into a low-income section of town, and then try to do our best to restore some Sunday service. But the 70 number was where we were targeting, and I know that's not what we're talking about, but that really helped us get towards implementing or getting back some enhanced service on a Sunday.
So, Garland, I think the issue was, when we, and I know this would seem like a while back, that when we were upping the salary to get school bus drivers and that, all the localities were looking for bus drivers, and no matter what we did as far as increasing the salary, it was still a problem recruiting, and I don't know if that's been resolved. And I know that now it's have collective bargaining, and that may make a difference. So that's, you have any thoughts on that?
Sure. The city manager and I have a conversation about this quite often. I believe that as we have now a tentative agreement for a contract, I think it's going to be a recruiting tool for us, because if you look at the nature of the contract, individuals when they come in the door will know what they get paid, and it basically points to the fact that how long it takes them to get to the top of the scale. That is a direct recruiting tool that most transit agencies around the country use. We are now in that grouping, assuming that we'll be able to sign that contract. It is I think it is a fair contract on both sides. No one got everything that they wanted, but it is a fair contract, and I think the drivers will feel the effect and also are very pleased based on their tentative vote, which was unanimous. So I think it's a recruiting tool.
And then you look for me to provide the sobering news only if we stay ahead of everyone else, because if they react, it blunts the impact, and I am concerned about that.
Understood.
But I do think his point of the predictability of being able to know how you escalate up the scale and arrive at the top with a prescribed set of years is very attractive. But I am concerned about the market responding to what we're doing.
Okay, so we need to kind of come to a resolution on the tax rate changes. So I know everyone has a preference or their position, but we need to give staff some direction. We have to resolve this evening.
Can we see the fancy spreadsheet?
For the cars?
Yes, please. And do the drop down for because I noticed there were other options in there. I think we'll be able to see what the rate would be if it was, that's what it is now, but if it was 4.4, which would be the 20-cent raise, what would that look like? So instead of $84, it would be $28. Instead of $252, it would be $87. And again, 75% of the vehicles in the city are less than $15,000.
I think that the spreadsheet that you used to have is what I would support. I think it spreads the pain out. I realize taxes can be a good thing. I realize we need taxes to fund the government, but no one likes paying
Spreads
to
the
miss it.
obligation out.
There you go. Spreads the obligation out to care for the common good. I hear Michael's point. He always makes really great points about, progressive versus regressive. I have to balance that off what I said earlier about people who own their homes. So for me, I feel like where we landed on that spreadsheet seems like a good compromise.
I think we have a little room to go higher. I understand, though, the point that we haven't given the public a lot of, even though we would give them the required time to respond, we haven't necessarily given them a lot of time to respond. I'm more comfortable with the scenario we had on the other spreadsheet. We don't have to go back to it, but than I am with not touching this one at all. And then we can revisit earlier maybe how we can help the machinery folks for next year.
Okay.
Can you please go back to that other spreadsheet?
Gong thought he was off tonight, didn't he?
Michael?
Again, it just doesn't strike me as right to be relying on our most regressive taxes. And I say respectfully, I worry if we overrepresent the perspective of homeowners and underrepresent the perspective of, say, people at 30% of area median income and below. And I think we're going to find that we're going to have a very hard time making a case to the public about the sales tax increase for schools in the context of all this.
One of the things that I had said, I don't know, a month or two ago, and I still haven't figured out whether there's an answer to the question that I was posing, is if we assume that the General Assembly and the governor allow us the option of having a referendum on a 1% sales tax for school construction, I believe that the only way that it would make sense to try to present that to the voters is in the context of saying we're going to cut certain other taxes. It doesn't have to be a dollar for dollar trade, but it ought to be some kind of a statement that says we're not just going to put on another 1% and take that roughly $10–12 million, whatever it's going to be, and go wild with it. I was hoping that there might be some way that we could find some taxes that if we increase them, or whether or not we increase them, but that we could let's say in the month of May, or probably in the month of December, after we have hopefully gotten approval for this sales tax bump for school construction, where we could say, because of that, we're going to reduce certain other taxes. And I acknowledge that with real estate and personal property, both, one of the tax payments will already have been made. And that, I think, is, although I've heard of jurisdictions that cut in the middle of the budget year or change in the middle of the budget year, I think it's more confusing than and not to mention probably more work for the commissioner. And I don't know whether there is going to be anything that we could reasonably do at that point with this mixture, except perhaps to cut the meals tax significantly. That's at least an option.
And I would support that. I think in terms of, regressive taxation, I can certainly see how the meals tax hits people most in that context.
I mean,
But we're still, we may or may not get that sales tax.
that's right. And the other thing that, of course, that we don't know in all of this, and we're coming right down to the wire in a way that is very difficult for anybody to make any plans for. But we don't know we don't even know whether we're going to have a state budget. Yep. We don't know whether that state budget is going to embrace any of the potentially, somebody once said it could be up to $5 million worth of money coming from the state budget back to the school system. And if so, then that enables the school system to solve a number of their problems without additional funds from us. I don't know how to figure on that, except to hope to God that we don't end up, as we did last year, with the budget going until September. So I don't know how to plan in any way that kind of takes some of these contingencies into account. And maybe the only thing that we can do is to say, maybe the only thing that would be significant would be to cut the meals tax if and when we get the approval for the additional sales tax. It still isn't going to get us close to a dollar for dollar, or even to 1 to 2 kind of a balance, but I don't know.
And so,
I'm struggling with this.
yeah, and so, yeah, I think that if we find out something during the year, but something else to, in relating to Michael's concern is that, maybe I can be reminded of what we're putting towards like rent relief and, I know part of the $10 million, approximately $10 million we put aside each year is for rent relief and support and things like that. Do you have those numbers offhand?
What numbers for how much of?
That we provide for rent relief.
Chat and
Oh.
real estate
Yeah.
and
We
elderly
can give it,
disabled.
I mean, it's 2.8 million in the budget, I think.
Mhm.
I can tell her, hold on.
And remember, rent is just for elderly and disabled, so that doesn't apply to everybody.
But this scenario here will give us the 6 bus drivers that the city manager had, kind of proposed in his original, not his original budget, but kind of what he had hoped for.
And
good.
that's assuming that we allocate those 600 towards
Yes, yes,
That's the only way to do it.
CAT, yeah.
That would be the expectation,
yeah.
I think.
So, I know where you stand, Michael, and I understand that. So Lloyd, where you still pondering or what?
Well, I mean, I want to hear, obviously, we still have to have a public hearing on it. I want to hear some further thoughts. I guess the balance that has been up there most recently that shows the $601,000 at the bottom, which might then be used for hiring bus drivers, probably makes as much sense as any for right now, but not convinced, but kind of leaning that way.
Mayor, here's the tax relief. So there's rent relief,
And tax for the disabled and LSC.
and then these are the grant amounts, which is the fixed grant.
Can I ask a logistics question?
Hmm?
If more people apply for rent relief than we've budgeted for, do we turn them down beyond that, or do we spend it and then deal with it some other way?
It's never come up. No idea.
Okay.
I imagine,
We could supplement the budget. I mean, one thing to keep in mind too is that, as we reported with the first quarter financial report, we are anticipating a surplus, a revenues budget surplus right now for FY2024. In addition, any tax increases that you impose, we're gonna get half of that in '24, which is also not counted for, and will add to the surplus. So if that were the case, we could come back to you and amend the budget and use the surplus for that.
Okay.
did y'all catch that? Or make sure you understood that, like, the personal property and real estate, some of that's gonna appear as a surplus for 2024. So, when we get to the end of it, just so you know.
Which, I think we had just talked about this a little bit, but it sounds like, and I'm not saying this is guaranteed, and I understand the past few budgets had very unique circumstances coming out of COVID. But if it were the case again that the revenue estimates were off, not factoring in the tax increase component being part of the surplus, but was off in a systematic way, it sounds like we don't have a default posture in terms of how we'd handle the fact that we increased taxes, but it turns out at the end of the day, we didn't even need to.
So I would just say one thing.
Like a response, like a backup plan for that? Is that what you're saying, Michael?
No, I think Lloyd was touching on it, and I don't know what it would be, but would our posture be okay? Then we're first looking to reduce the increase that we made to the meals tax, or keep it as a surplus, or reduce this other revenue source we raised. So that's what I'm kind of getting
Or
at.
are we just anticipating that because of the next steps of not common class, collective bargaining, we're gonna need that?
So keep in mind, this gets back into the one-time money use for ongoing expenses.
And I'm
So
not talking about surplus use, I'm talking about if the new baseline for the general fund is higher than we projected.
right, but that would go into your base budget for '26. So our revenue projections, this is what we will balance the budget off of, and we won't know what the actual collections are to assess a surplus until we've actually completed the year, which again, you would pick up that base in '26. So anything that you couldn't adjust your budget in '25 for your revenue projection without knowing your actual collections, and you wouldn't know that until the year was over.
Yeah, and I understand that. I mean, it's just, do we accept that as the new baseline, or do we adjust from the fact that revenues were higher, so we didn't need it into that next budget cycle? I don't know if that makes sense, but.
I mean, we try to account for that when we bring you the revenue projections for the budget.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of already baked in. And hopefully, as we're getting further away from COVID, those margins are gonna be more narrow. Again, assessed values, we don't have anything to do with. But personal property is another one, like those assessed values are still pretty artificially high, and the expectation is those assessments are gonna come down. So even raising the tax, you know, it might be worth $30,238 this year, but it could be worth $28,000 and something next year because those values may be less. So it's kind of a moving target.
So what I'm hearing is that we are comfortable with this, but if we should find that we get extra revenue or some things change, not extra revenue, but things change in Richmond, that we will look at first look at reducing the meal tax first.
I mean, one of the things you can think about is that if you are able, if the meals, the sales tax passes and we are able to take that to referendum and you're able to, and that's approved, that is definite money that you can attribute to debt service, which is an absolute one. It is a cost that's in the base of the budget, but we already know what our 5-year plan looks like, and so that is something that you could definitely attribute to a cost savings, which would be ongoing to reduce your budget. If you're looking at meals tax, because that is more of something that is funding your base budget, it's a little bit harder to flip back and forth with those rates. And we were just discussing, I'm not sure if we can actually change property tax rates mid-year.
I'm not sure you can, once the tangible or the personal property or the real estate rate is set, I'm not sure you can change that midstream. There was a special, there was a bill that passed during COVID when the personal property rates were going up, but it was like a one-time thing that allowed localities to do sort of a rebate against taxes already paid. But in general, I think you're sort of stuck with your personal property rate and your real estate rate for that fiscal year, if that answers what you're speaking to. Or you may not have even been asking that.
Well, I mean, I think I had concluded that, and maybe from prior conversations with you, that it would be an administrative mess, and that was sufficient for me for these purposes. So as a practical matter, we're looking at the meals tax.
The trust taxes would be easier to do it with, but like meals and lodging, but I don't, the property taxes, I don't even think it's allowed.
So, council, is this what staff shall advertise? I'm supportive of it.
Weren't we already advertising?
Yeah, it's already advertised.
Yeah,
I
it's
guess
already
the question is, so for purposes of the 15th, we need to bring to you an ordinance with the balanced budget. So we would include these revenues, and then what are we doing with the 601,000? Is that transfer to CAD, or is there something else?
I think it's definitely, what I'm hearing from council is that if we approve this scenario here, that 455, 460 go towards the hiring of 6 bus drivers. I'm seeing
I remember,
4.
was that the final answer? I thought 6 would,
6 would cost 455.
okay, that's right.
As many bus drivers as you can
Yeah,
get with that.
yeah, I'm sorry. I thought I heard 450 something or whatever, but whatever, as many as you can get with that.
For 6.
6 drivers is 456.
Yeah.
So 7 or 8.
Okay.
8 drivers gets you right about the 600,000. Yeah, within a few $1,000 bucks.
Yeah.
I really think it is important that we begin the process of getting the bus system up to snuff. Everybody has said for years it's not up to snuff. We've got to do that. we may as well take a good start this year.
Yeah, I think it was very sobering when Garland, I think, sat right there and said that, was it a horrible bus system, he said? Yeah, we can do better, so. We okay?
Yep.
Sam, do you have the direction you need?
Yes, there was one lingering item.
Okay.
That was included in what I shared with you. You all, or I felt like most of you indicated an interest in doing something for AHIP. AHIP is outside of VCF because they applied in HOPS, and that is a different program and a different support mechanism.
Yeah.
So if that is a desire, then the only source of that would be out of this 601 is a way to look at it possibly, or out of your council strategic initiatives fund.
Yeah.
What was the request amount for?
Where did I have them on here? 75,000 was the number that I captured. I think it's more, it might be a little more than that, but 75 was the
Yeah.
number I,
Your
Okay.
your memo talked about 100,000, it said up to 100,000.
up to 100,
Yeah.
yeah. I
So-
think that was their original request.
This is one that, you know, at least I know that I've talked with Sam on, because I know the work that AHIP does in, you know, particular the Fifield and 10th and Page neighborhoods where they keep people in their house, and this is, you know, it takes man hours to do that, and I'm not sure what was up with the application, but I know the work that they do. So, and I understand that we couldn't deal with it with the VCF funding, but it is a consideration that I would like for council to consider.
So it's a two-part question, amount and source.
And this is funding their HOPS application?
Yeah, for operating support,
And how much did we have in our discretionary fund again?
395. I think.
So
Yeah,
is there already an allocation for AHIP?
For program, yes, but not for operating support. They were funded in CAF for actual work.
Okay.
And this request was in HOPS, that was for operating support. That was not funded.
Basically help them with their overhead.
Well, I would say potentially, but quite frankly, I need to go through and look at their HOPS application summary again, because I can't even remember what the
Yeah, I don't
specific
remember either.
request was for. But I'm happy to email tonight when I look at it. And I'm a little reluctant to touch the strategic initiatives fund, just because we know there's always going to be unexpected things that come up. So it's good to, you know, have as much as we can there, just to kind of plan for that strategically.
Yeah. So, yeah, and that, I didn't mention it with the budget because I knew that we were gonna be coming down to a few dollars. I was looking at 40 to 50 from the strategic, but we can do that. Can we do that outside
You
the?
can do that separately.
Yeah,
That's
outside, I
your
mean,
call.
we don't have to do that by the 15th.
No.
So it gives us a little bit more time to,
Yeah.
to look at.
And there's now like
Okay.
just over $15,000 in the unallocated VCF.
12,700,
What?
12,700,
12,700, okay.
but they didn't apply there,
I know.
so I don't know how that's different. If you use it in a different way. I'll have to talk to some people.
Well, if
You got
necessary, I
that.
mean, you just say we're taking out of this budget item and putting into this budget item and then spend it.
If you so choose.
So where are we landing on this? We're
I
saying,
think we
You're
seem
gonna
like,
punt that.
yeah,
and that's okay with you? I mean, you can still
Your call.
get with the 15th, or is there a decision you need tonight from us?
We don't have to have that decision because it's not associated with VCF. VCF is a part of the budget, therefore it needed to be
Okay.
resolved. This was separate and apart. It just came up as a part of the work sessions when you heard various requests for reconsideration.
That would be, you could use your council strategic initiatives accounts. That's a perfect thing for a year in surplus. There.
We still have the ARP reconsiderations and all. I mean, there will be options, but it's just a matter of timing. So it was because it came up to
Yeah.
you on more than one occasion in public comment.
Yeah.
So we're saying, let's just,
Yeah, and that's, I wasn't gonna mention that tonight with this because Yeah, but thank you. We can, you know,
All
we
right,
can
we will
consider
note
that.
the deferral.
Okay. Sam, so is that what you needed? Is it public comment now, or you want more, you know, you had
That's
more?
all we had.
That's all we have left.
Okay, so we now have public comment. If you want to come up, if anyone from here for the public would like to speak, you have 3 minutes. State your name and your residence, and thank you. If anyone would like to speak. Yes, ma'am.
Good evening. I'm Doreen Bonnet. I'm Executive Director of Birth Sisters of Charlottesville, and I live in Charlottesville. We are a community-based doula organization supporting women of color through their birth journey. We requested $100,000 through the Vibrant Community Fund, and while we're grateful for the $60,000, I'm here to request that we be fully funded for the essential work that we do in the community. We have a team of 18 community-based doulas, 6 of which are state-certified doulas. The efforts of these women and our organization is literally saving lives. Couple of statistics. Maternal mortality rate for Black women in Virginia in 2021 was 79.1. For white women, it was 32.6. In 2023, for the women that Birth Sisters supported, it was 0. The infant mortality rate among babies born to Black women in Virginia is 10.4, nearly 2 times the state rate. Those supported by Birth Sisters, 0. The preterm birth rate among babies born to Black women was 13.3, 1.5 times higher than the rate of all other babies. Those supported by Birth Sisters of Charlottesville, 0. We also had 0 miscarriages in 2023. So this work is essential because we are literally saving lives. And we're supporting healthy birth outcomes for Black and brown women and families in the community. And I wanted to share a quote from Dr. Chris Chisholm, who is with the OB department, the Maternal and Fetal Medicine Clinic. He said, during World Doula Week, we want to take a moment to acknowledge and celebrate the important role that professional doulas serve in the lives of their patients before, during, and after their labor and birth. In addition, providing important support for physiologic childbirth, early postpartum care, and lactation, doulas are an important source of personal support for pregnant persons who have experienced traumatic health care events. They can help their clients navigate a sometimes confusing and overwhelming health system. Patients who use a doula experience positive outcomes of pregnancy more frequently. We are proud to support the role of doulas in improving outcomes for their clients and especially celebrate the important role that the Birth Sisters of Charlottesville are playing in improving pregnancy outcomes for Black and brown birthing families in our community. So this additional funding would allow us to continue this essential work in supporting more mothers of color, training more community-based doulas, and expanding our program to address the emotional needs that our clients face. Thank you.
Thank you. How many clients did you say you serve again?
For our core program, of the core services, we served 37 families last year. But we serve a lot more families and individuals through our other programming, like our Welcome Womb Boutique, which we receive donated items, and our clients can come and take whatever they need. We also do programming to support emotional needs of our clients. We have support groups. We had a BUIQ this past year, which celebrated Black Breastfeeding Week to encourage more Black breastfeeding among our community. So a lot of our other programs. So we touch more people than just our core program.
Thank you.
Anything else? Thank you.
Thank you. Next person, yes, ma'am.
Hi, Deborah Weiss, live on Head Street, about 4 blocks away from here. Just wanted to talk about, like, I'm just a normal person. I'm single, one income family, have my own home business, which I've had since 1995 when I moved here. Bought my house for $115,000. Did something about 10 years ago that y'all want now, which is I built a house in my backyard, right? Because I thought, you know, the taxes are going up, I'm gonna need, you know, extra income. And was one of the people instrumental in getting the detached accessory unit in the zoning code last time you did it, 20 years ago. And so now I'm like the canary in the coal mine here. So now my property is assessed at $929,000. My assessment's gone up over $60,000 in 2 years. I haven't done anything to my property. I short-term rent it because it's in my backyard. It's a lighter footprint and more respectful for my neighbors. The people who come and stay in there eat at our restaurants, and they go to wineries, and they participate in weddings, and they spend tons of money in the city. But my taxes are now, with right now, they're $8,900 a year, and I'm starting to struggle. I feel like I'm being priced out of my home. I feel like I'm being priced out of the neighborhood, and I maybe, struggle to stay in the city. And I feel like I'm being penalized for, investing in my property and trying to stay in my neighborhood and make things nice. And I have to get a business license for my home-based business. I have to pay business personal property tax on my home-based business. I have to get a business license for my rental, business personal property taxes on my rental, which is a home-based thing. I have to get a special use permit for my rental, which I have to pay $100 a year for, which other home-based businesses do not have to pay for. I drive my car less than 1,000 miles a year, and I have to pay, personal property taxes on my car. And, I just feel like I'm soaked, on the taxes. And every time that you raise the real estate tax, the assessments are going to go up, and it's my short-term rental keeps my house affordable to me. And I just want you to know that when you just say, oh, let's spend another penny, get another $1 million, that has a real effect on homeowners like me that are just trying to stay here in the city. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Yes, sir.
Evening, everybody. Dan Miller. I live at 1107 Avon Street. It's kind of my job is sort of to ask dumb questions and then have smart people tell me how I'm wrong. So I was going to kind of do that here. I was curious if the meals tax that you're talking about is on, that's not on groceries, right? That's on drinks and prepared meals. I was just thinking, and this isn't really a comment as much as it's a question or a framing. I think Councilmember Payne, I'm kind of aligned with you on find the most progressive way to do something that nobody wants to do, right? And I'm wondering here, I think a lot about Charlottesville and how we have the core of this city that really is why people, certainly why I moved here, it's why I think a lot of people visit here. It kind of is the driver for a lot of the economic activity that we have. And I've just been thinking as we've been talking about taxes here that while a meals tax or a lodging tax in some ways are more regressive, they're also the only way that we have to expand our tax base to people who live in Charlottesville but actually don't live in Charlottesville. And so I'm wondering if that's something you guys are thinking about, if it's part of this context for how we're going to tax, the area, and not just if by making something more progressive in a narrow sense, we're actually making it more regressive in a wider sense, in that we're removing some tax burden from people that live in the county but do a lot of actual living and working in the city. So hopefully that comment kind of makes sense, but I'm sure this is something you guys are thinking about, but it was something that I was thinking about sitting here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak? If not, I will close the public comment. Any other? Thank you. We stand adjourned.